While I was in the delivery room bringing our daughter into the world, my husband of 8 years was signing away my rights to our family home. The hidden security camera I'd installed during our renovation captured everything: his nervous pacing, the notary at our dining table, even the celebratory phone call he made to his mother immediately after. What he didn't know was that the motion-activated alert had sent the footage directly to my cloud storage, preserving his betrayal in high definition for the judge to see 3 months later. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The contractions had started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in April. I shook Nathan awake, my voice tight with a mixture of excitement and fear. "It's time," I whispered, gripping his shoulder as another wave of pain washed over me. He blinked awake, momentarily confused before his eyes widened with recognition. We'd been preparing for this moment for months, the hospital bag packed and waiting by the door, the nursery painted a soft mint green with a hand-stenciled border of woodland animals I'd spent weekends perfecting, the car seat installed and checked twice by a safety technician. Okay, Nathan said, jumping out of bed with more energy than anyone should have at that hour. "Let me get dressed. Do you need water? Should I call Dr. Patel now or wait?" I couldn't help but smile, despite the pain. This was the Nathan I had fallen in love with, attentive, slightly nervous, eager to get everything right. The Nathan who had proposed on a hillside overlooking the city where we'd first met as graduate students. The Nathan who had spent 3 weekends installing shelves in the nursery, measuring twice, drilling once, determined to create the perfect space for our child. "Call when we're in the car," I managed, focusing on my breathing the way we'd practiced in our childbirth classes. "But tell my sister now." The drive to Metropolitan Hospital was a blur of streetlights and mounting contractions. Nathan kept glancing over at me, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You're doing great, Elise," he assured me, his voice steady despite the worry in his eyes. "We're almost there." I nodded, unable to speak as another contraction gripped me. They were coming faster now, more intense than I had imagined possible. By the time we arrived at the hospital, I was fully dilated. Everything was happening more quickly than our birth plan had anticipated. "Mrs. Donovan is progressing rapidly," I heard the nurse tell Dr. Patel when she arrived. "The baby's heartbeat is strong, but I think we're looking at an imminent delivery." Nathan was by my side, holding my hand, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. "I'm right here," he kept saying. "You've got this." When Dr. Patel confirmed I was ready to push, Nathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me with an odd expression. "It's work," he said, hesitating. "A client emergency." I told them I'm unavailable. "But—" "Go," I said between breaths. "Take the call in the hallway. Be quick." He looked relieved, squeezing my hand before stepping out. When he returned 5 minutes later, there was something different about him, a nervous energy that seemed out of place even in the anxious atmosphere of the delivery room. "Everything okay?" I asked, momentarily distracted from my pain. "Fine," he said too quickly. "Just a misunderstanding about the Peterson contract. Nothing that can't wait." I didn't have time to question him further as the most intense contraction yet overtook me. Dr. Patel positioned herself at the foot of the bed. "All right, Elise, on the next contraction, I need you to push," she instructed. The next hour was a symphony of pain, encouragement, and focused effort. Nathan stayed by my side, counting through pushes, offering ice chips and murmuring support. When our daughter finally entered the world at 7:42 a.m., her indignant cry filled the room and tears streamed down my face. "She's perfect," Nathan whispered, his voice thick with emotion as the nurses placed our daughter on my chest. "Absolutely perfect." In that moment, exhausted and overwhelmed with love for the tiny human being we had created, I couldn't imagine anything more complete than our family. Nathan gently touched our daughter's tiny hand, and she instinctively gripped his finger. "Hello, Charlotte," he said softly, using the name we had chosen together if we had a girl. "Welcome to the world." The next few hours passed in a haze of postpartum examinations, first feedings, and a parade of nurses checking vitals and offering guidance. Nathan was unusually attentive, almost hovering, insisting on handling all communications with family and friends. "You rest," he said, taking my phone. "I'll let everyone know Charlotte has arrived safely." It wasn't until later, when I was moved to the recovery room and Charlotte was sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside my bed, that I noticed Nathan checking his watch repeatedly. "Do you need to be somewhere?" I asked, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. The adrenaline of childbirth was wearing off, leaving me exhausted and sore. No, he replied quickly. "Just tracking how long Charlotte has been sleeping. The nurse said to feed her every 2 to 3 hours, right?" I nodded, though something about his explanation didn't quite ring true. Before I could press further, my sister Julia arrived, arms full of flowers and a plush elephant for Charlotte. "Oh my God, she's gorgeous," Julia gasped, peering into the bassinet. "She has your nose, Elise." Nathan stood abruptly. "I should go get some things from home. More clothes for you. The nursing pillow we forgot. Julia can stay with you, right?" Julia looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, take your time." "Thanks," Nathan said, already heading for the door. "I'll be back in a couple of hours." As he left, Julia raised an eyebrow at me. "Is he okay? He seems a little wired." "Just new dad nerves, I think," I replied, though the knot forming in my stomach suggested otherwise. "It's been an intense morning." Julia settled into the chair Nathan had vacated, pulling it closer to my bed. "So tell me everything. How bad? Was it? Did the epidural help? Were the nurses good?" I recounted the whirlwind of my delivery, grateful for my sister's comforting presence. Julia had always been my rock, especially after our parents died in a car accident 5 years earlier. She lived just 20 minutes from us and had been my primary support throughout the pregnancy whenever Nathan's work as a financial advisor kept him working late. While we talked, Charlotte woke and began to fuss. Julia watched with teary eyes as I navigated the still unfamiliar process of breastfeeding. "You're a natural," she said softly. "Mom would be so proud of you right now." The mention of our mother brought a fresh wave of emotion. "I kept thinking about her during labor," I admitted, wishing she could be here to meet her granddaughter. Julia squeezed my hand. "She is here, in a way. In you, and now in Charlotte." We fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by Charlotte's occasional nursing sounds. After a while, my phone chimed with a notification, one I had almost forgotten. I'd set up months ago during our kitchen renovation. "Can you hand me my phone?" I asked Julia. "It's probably just another congratulations text." Julia passed me the phone, and I saw it wasn't a text, but an alert from our home security system. Motion detected in the dining room. Nathan must be home gathering the items he'd mentioned. Without thinking much of it, I tapped on the notification, expecting to see my husband collecting my things. Instead, the live feed showed Nathan sitting at our dining room table across from a woman I didn't recognize. She was dressed professionally and had documents spread out between them. I turned up the volume. "Just need your signature here and here," the woman was saying, pointing to various places on the papers. "And your wife's signature." "As I explained," Nathan interrupted, "my wife authorized me to sign on her behalf. She's in the hospital after just giving birth and explicitly asked me to handle this today since the deadline couldn't be extended." The woman, a notary I realized, looked hesitant. Typically in title transfers, especially removing someone's name, we require both parties to— "I have power of attorney," Nathan said smoothly, sliding another document toward her. Everything is in order. My wife and I discussed this extensively. The property is being transferred to my name alone for tax purposes, on the advice of our financial planner. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my heart racing. We had never discussed removing my name from our house title. We had never created any power of attorney. The home had been purchased with money from my parents' life insurance policy as the down payment, a fact Nathan was now conveniently omitting, as he effectively stole the property from me on the day I gave birth to our child. "What is it?" Julia asked, noticing my expression. "Elise, you've gone white." Wordlessly, I turned the phone toward her. We watched together as Nathan forged my signature on document after document, his hand steady, practiced, as if he'd been rehearsing this betrayal for weeks. "That son of a bitch," Julia whispered. On the screen, the notary was applying her stamp to the documents, making the transfer official. Nathan gathered the papers, his expression shifting to one of relief as he walked the woman to the door. Once she left, he pulled out his phone. "Mom, it's done," he said, his voice carrying clearly through my phone's speaker. "The house is solely in my name now. Yes, she's still at the hospital with the baby. No, she has no idea. By the time she finds out, it'll be too late to contest it." I felt physically ill, the pain of this betrayal somehow more acute than the childbirth I'd endured hours earlier. As I watched, Nathan walked into our home office and opened the safe behind the painting, a safe whose combination I didn't know, despite my repeated requests to share such information. He removed a thick folder and began transferring documents into it. From the angle of the camera, I could make out bank statements and what appeared to be property deeds, more secrets he'd been keeping. "We need to call the police," Julia said, her voice tight with anger. "He's committing fraud." "No," I said, my mind suddenly clear despite the emotional chaos. "Not yet. I need to understand the full scope of what he's doing first. If we confront him now, he'll know about the cameras." Julia looked at me with concern. "Elise, you just had a baby. You shouldn't have to deal with this right now." I glanced down at Charlotte, still peacefully nursing, unaware that her father was dismantling the security of her future as she took her first breaths in the world. "That's exactly why I need to handle this carefully," I replied, a new resolve hardening within me. For her sake. I looked back at the screen where Nathan was now shredding documents, erasing evidence of his deception. He doesn't know that I'm watching, and that's the only advantage I have right now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The hospital room felt suddenly cold as I handed my phone back to Julia, my mind racing, with implications. Charlotte had fallen asleep at my breast, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in our family's foundation. "Record everything," I told Julia, my voice steadier than I felt. "Save the footage to multiple locations." Julia nodded, her fingers moving quickly across my phone screen. "Already on it. I'm sending copies to my email, your cloud storage, and I'm going to back it up on my laptop when I get home." The methodical way we responded might have seemed strange to an outsider. There were no tears, no hysterical outbursts, just a focused efficiency born from shock. But beneath my calm exterior, molten anger was pooling, hardening my resolve with each passing moment. "We need to think this through carefully," I said, gently transferring Charlotte to the bassinet. "Nathan's coming back soon, and he can't suspect that we know anything." Julia's face darkened. "How can you even look at him after what we just—" "Ah!" "Because right now, appearances are everything," I explained. "If he realizes I've discovered what he's done, he'll accelerate whatever plan he's implementing. I need time to understand the full scope of his deception and protect myself and Charlotte legally." My sister studied me with a mixture of concern and admiration. When did you become so strategic? The question made me pause. The truth was, I'd always been the planner in our relationship, the one who researched investments, maintained our budget spreadsheets, and structured our savings goals. Nathan had been the charismatic one, the relationship builder whose career in financial advising seemed natural given his ability to connect with clients. I had trusted him to handle larger financial decisions precisely because of his professional background. I've always been strategic, I realized aloud. I just made the mistake of trusting the wrong person with too much power. As if on cue, my phone chimed with another security alert. Nathan was leaving the house, a duffel bag in hand that I recognized as mine. Nothing about his demeanor suggested a man who had just committed fraud against his wife of 8 years. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who believed himself unobserved and unchallenged. He'll be here in 20 minutes, I calculated, a plan already forming. Julia, I need you to do something for me. I outlined what I needed, calls, to specific people, information gathered, documents secured, speaking rapidly but clearly. Julia took notes on her phone, asking clarifying questions where needed. Are you sure about this? She asked when I finished. It seems so. Cold. What's cold is manipulating legal documents while your wife is giving birth, I countered. What's cold is planning to strip away your child's security on the day she enters the world. Julia nodded, squeezing my hand. You're right. I'll start making calls now from the cafeteria. Text me when he arrives so I know when to come back. After she left, I took a deep breath and looked at Charlotte, her tiny features peaceful in sleep. I promise you, I whispered, he will not take what belongs to us. I used the next 15 minutes to contact Dr. Patel directly, explaining that I needed to extend my hospital stay by at least 2 days, citing complications that weren't entirely fabricated. My blood pressure had been elevated during delivery. She agreed readily, promising to adjust my chart accordingly. Next, I called my office. As an architectural project manager for a prominent firm, I had been planning to take 12 weeks of maternity leave. Now I needed to ensure my position was secure and that certain benefits remained accessible. Congratulations, Elise. My boss, Marcus, exclaimed when I reached him. How's the baby? She's perfect, I replied, infusing my voice with new mother joy I no longer felt. I just wanted to confirm my leave paperwork is all processed correctly. All set, Marcus assured me. Your job is secure, benefits continue uninterrupted, and we can't wait to meet little Charlotte when you're ready for visitors. One more thing, I added, trying to sound casual. Could you email me copies of my last year's performance reviews and salary documentation? I'm updating our family files while I have downtime in the hospital. If Marcus found the request odd, he didn't show it. Sure thing. I'll have HR send everything over today. I had just ended the call when Nathan appeared in the doorway, carrying my duffel bag and wearing a broad smile that now seemed like a grotesque mask. How are my girls? He asked cheerfully, setting the bag down and approaching the bassinet with seemingly genuine affection. I forced a tired smile, channeling all my acting abilities. We're good. Charlotte's been sleeping peacefully. How was traffic? Not bad, he replied, his attention on our daughter. Has she eaten again? About an hour ago, I said, watching him carefully. There was nothing in his demeanor to suggest the duplicitous actions I'd witnessed. This was the man I thought I'd married, attentive and caring. The disconnect between what I knew and what I was seeing made me feel slightly disoriented, as if I were experiencing some form of psychological vertigo. You look exhausted, Nathan observed, finally turning his attention to me. Have you slept at all? Not really, I admitted truthfully. And there's been a slight complication. Dr. Patel wants to keep me here a couple more days to monitor my blood pressure. A flicker of something. Annoyance? Concern? crossed his features before he composed them into an expression of husbandly worry. That doesn't sound good. Is it serious? Just precautionary, I assured him, noting how quickly he had masked his initial reaction. But it means I'll need more things from home. Of course, he said immediately. Just make a list and I'll bring whatever you need. I smiled gratefully, hating how easy it was to play this role when inside I was calculating my next moves like a chess player seeing 20 steps ahead. Thank you. Julia's been amazing, but I know she has to get back to work tomorrow. That's what husbands are for, Nathan replied, taking my hand. The touch I had once found comforting now made my skin crawl, but I returned the gentle pressure of his fingers. Actually, I said, allowing exhaustion to seep into my voice, would you mind watching Charlotte for a bit while I shower? I feel like I need to wash away the delivery room. Go ahead, he encouraged. Take your time. We'll be fine. In the small hospital bathroom, I turned on the shower and sat fully clothed on the closed toilet lid, pulling out the second phone. Julia had slipped to me before leaving, her old device, newly activated with a prepaid SIM card. Moving quickly, I sent secure messages to the 3 people Julia had contacted on my behalf: a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud, a family law attorney with experience in emergency filings, and a private investigator recommended by a colleague who had gone through a contentious divorce. The responses came back quickly, confirming appointments for video consultations that would occur during Nathan's work hours over the next 2 days. The attorney had already started preparing emergency injunctions based on the video evidence Julia had forwarded. I allowed myself 5 minutes to process what was happening, 5 minutes to acknowledge the grief of discovering that the life I thought I had was an elaborate fiction, that the man I had chosen to father my child was capable of calculated betrayal. Tears came hot and fast, but silently. I covered my mouth with a towel to muffle any sounds that might escape. When the 5 minutes elapsed, I washed my face with cold water, changed into clean clothes, and emerged from the bathroom with wet hair and the demeanor of a tired new mother who had enjoyed a refreshing shower. Nathan was standing by the window, Charlotte cradled expertly in his arms as he pointed out city landmarks she couldn't possibly see or understand. And that tall building with the spire is where Mommy designs beautiful spaces for people, he was telling her softly. And over there is the park where we'll take you to play when you're bigger. The tender scene nearly broke my composure. How could the same man who spoke so lovingly to our daughter be the one I'd watched committing fraud against me hours earlier? What kind of compartmentalization allowed him to betray his family with one hand while cradling his newborn with the other? She seems to like your voice, I commented, forcing warmth into my tone as I approached them. Nathan smiled down at Charlotte. She's incredible, isn't she? I can't believe we made something so perfect. Yes, I agreed, the irony of his statement not lost on me. Perfect. Julia returned shortly after, carrying coffee and a bag from the hospital gift shop. If Nathan noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor toward him, he didn't comment on it. I should head to the office for a few hours, he announced after Julia had settled in. End of quarter reports are due, and with the baby coming a week early, I'm behind on client portfolios. Of course, I nodded, secretly relieved. His absence would give me time to continue organizing my counter-strategy without maintaining the exhausting pretense of normalcy. We'll be fine here with Julia. Nathan kissed Charlotte's forehead, then mine, and headed for the door. Call if you need anything. I'll be back this evening with dinner. The moment he left, Julia turned to me. How are you doing this? I could barely look at him without wanting to scream. I glanced down at Charlotte, now awake and gazing at the world with the unfocused curiosity of newborns. For her, I said simply. And because right now, information is power. The longer he thinks I'm in the dark, the more evidence we can gather. The attorney is impressive, Julia reported, keeping her voice low. She's already drafting emergency motions based on the video footage. The forensic accountant wants access to all your financial records as soon as possible. I nodded, mentally cataloging what I could access remotely versus what might be in Nathan's control. What about the investigator? He thinks there's more, Julia said grimly. Based on the calculated nature of what Nathan did today, he suspects this isn't isolated behavior. The investigator's instinct aligned with my own growing suspicion. The confident way Nathan had forged my signature, the prepared power of attorney, document, the practiced lies to the notary, none of it suggested a first-time offender. I believe it, I said quietly. You don't wake up one day and suddenly decide to steal your wife's house while she's giving birth. This has been building for some time. Julia hesitated, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you think, is there someone else? The possibility had occurred to me, but oddly, it seemed almost secondary to the financial betrayal. I don't know, I admitted. And right now, it's not my primary concern. I need to secure Charlotte's future first. As if understanding the gravity of the conversation, Charlotte began to fuss. I lifted her from the bassinet, marveling at how natural it felt to respond to her needs despite the chaos unfolding around us. You know what's strange? I said as I adjusted her against my shoulder. In some twisted way, I'm almost grateful this happened now, when Charlotte is too young to remember any of it. By the time she's old enough to understand, this will be a chapter we've already closed. Julia watched me with concern. You're in shock, Elise. It's okay to be devastated. I am devastated, I acknowledged, feeling the acute pain of betrayal pulse beneath my controlled exterior. But I'm also clearer than I've ever been. Nathan made a critical mistake today. He showed me exactly who he is at precisely the moment when I have the most motivation to fight back. As Charlotte quieted against my shoulder, I felt a fierce, protective resolve crystallize within me. The man who thought he could take advantage of my most vulnerable moment hadn't accounted for the strength that same moment would unleash. The primal, unstoppable force of a mother determined to protect her child. He thinks he's won, I told Julia, my voice steady with newfound purpose. But he's just started a war he can't possibly understand. The next 48 hours in the hospital became command central for what I privately termed Operation Protect Charlotte. Between feedings and medical checkups, I orchestrated a meticulous investigation into our financial life, uncovering layers of deception that made the house title transfer seem like merely the tip of an iceberg of betrayal. The forensic accountant, Leah Winters, conducted our first video consultation while Nathan was at his office, and Julia sat guard by my door. Looking at Leah's professionally neutral expression on my borrowed phone screen, I felt a strange sense of validation when she didn't seem shocked by what she was discovering. Unfortunately, Mrs. Donovan, what you're describing is not uncommon, she explained, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she accessed the financial records I'd provided remotely. Based on the bank statements you've shared, I'm seeing several red flags dating back approximately 14 months. 14 months, I repeated, processing the timeline. That's when I became pregnant. Leah paused, her eyes meeting mine through the screen. That timing may be significant. In my experience, major life changes often trigger financial manipulation in individuals who've been contemplating such actions. She directed my attention to unusual transfers from our joint savings account to an unfamiliar entity called Meridian Consulting. Small amounts at first, $2,000 here, $3,500 there, building to larger sums as my pregnancy progressed. This entity doesn't appear in any business registry I can access, Leah noted. It's likely a shell corporation, or possibly an account established under a business name but actually controlled by an individual. Nathan, I supplied, mentally calculating the total. Nearly $87,000 had disappeared through these transfers over the past year. Most likely, Leah agreed. But we'll need more evidence to confirm. Can you access your joint tax returns? Could, thanks to my methodical habit of keeping digital copies of all important documents. What I found there was even more disturbing. Our most recent returns showed significant reductions in Nathan's reported income compared to previous years, despite his frequent mentions of new high-value clients and performance bonuses. He's hiding income, Leah confirmed after reviewing the documents. Possibly offshore accounts or unreported cash payments. The house transfer makes more sense in this context. It's part of a larger strategy to shield assets. My mind reeled with implications. The man I'd married, the man I'd trusted with our financial future, had been systematically siphoning away our security, potentially since the moment he learned he was going to become a father. What's the end game? I asked Leah. What's the purpose of all this maneuvering? Based on the patterns I'm seeing, she replied carefully, this resembles preparation for a clean exit, financially speaking. Removing your name from assets, establishing separate funds, underreporting income. These are classic moves someone makes when planning to leave a relationship while maintaining maximum financial advantage. The clinical assessment hit me with surprising force. Despite the video evidence of Nathan's betrayal, some part of me had been searching for an alternative explanation. Perhaps he was facing some secret gambling debt or had made poor investments he was too ashamed to disclose. The idea that this was all strategic preparation to abandon Charlotte and me was both devastating and clarifying. What do we do now? I asked, grateful that my voice remained steady. Document everything, Leah advised. I'll continue tracing these transfers and identifying hidden assets. Meanwhile, you should secure copies of all financial records you can access without alerting him. Bank statements, investment accounts, property records, insurance policies, anything with both your names on it. After ending the call with Leah, I immediately connected with Rebecca Santos, the family law attorney Julia had contacted. Unlike Leah's professional detachment, Rebecca's approach was warmly strategic, her determination evident in her rapid-fire questions and direct advice. The video evidence is extraordinarily compelling, she confirmed, referring to the footage of Nathan transferring the house title. I've already prepared emergency motions to invalidate the transfer based on fraudulent representation and forgery. We can file these immediately, or we can wait to incorporate them into a larger legal strategy, depending on your preferred timeline. What would you recommend? I asked, adjusting Charlotte as she stirred against my chest. Rebecca considered the question carefully. Normally, I'd advise immediate action to protect your assets. However, given the evidence of broader financial manipulation that your accountant is uncovering, there may be strategic advantage in allowing Mr. Donovan to operate under the assumption that his maneuvers remain undetected. She leaned closer to her camera. Mrs. Donovan, the moment we file any legal action, he'll know you're aware of his activities. He'll likely accelerate any plans to hide assets or create barriers to your financial security. If you can maintain the appearance of ignorance while we build a comprehensive case, we'll be in a much stronger position. The thought of continuing to pretend ignorance around Nathan made my stomach churn, but the strategic logic was undeniable. How long? I asked. 2 weeks, Rebecca suggested. Give your accountant time to trace the money. Give our investigator time to establish patterns of behavior. Meanwhile, we'll prepare everything so we can move immediately when the time comes. 2 weeks of living with a stranger who wore my husband's face. 2 weeks of accepting his kisses and pretending we were a normal family, welcoming our first child. The prospect was daunting, but I'd endured 9 months of pregnancy and childbirth. I could certainly manage 14 more days of deception in service of securing Charlotte's future. 2 weeks, I agreed, but I want everything in place so we can move quickly if necessary. Rebecca nodded approvingly. That's wise. Sometimes these situations can escalate unexpectedly. Now, let's discuss your immediate priorities once you leave the hospital. Together, we created a detailed action plan, documents to secure, accounts to monitor, evidence to gather. Rebecca explained the legal protections available to me and outlined the likely scenarios once we initiated formal proceedings. One more thing, she added before concluding our call. Does your husband know about the security cameras in your home? No, I replied. I had them installed during our kitchen renovation last year when we had various contractors coming and going. Nathan was traveling for work during most of the installation. The system alerts only come to my phone. Perfect, Rebecca said. That's a significant advantage. Make sure he remains unaware of their existence, and consider installing additional cameras in areas where important documents might be stored or discussions might occur. My third consultation that day was with Michael Torres, the private investigator who specialized in cases of financial infidelity and hidden assets. Unlike Leah's analytical approach or Rebecca's strategic planning, Michael focused immediately on Nathan's patterns and potential vulnerabilities. Financial deception rarely exists in isolation, he explained, his voice low and measured. Based on the calculated nature of these actions and the timing aligned with your pregnancy, I suspect we're looking at a multiple-faceted exit strategy. You think there's someone else, I stated, finally giving voice to the possibility I'd been avoiding. Michael neither confirmed nor denied. Let's focus on establishing facts rather than assumptions. I'll be conducting background surveillance and digital intelligence gathering. What I need from you is information about his routines, any changes in behavior over the past year, and access to his communication patterns if possible. I provided what I could, details about Nathan's supposedly increased work hours, the business trips that had grown more frequent during my third trimester, the password to our shared family computer that he didn't know I had memorized. There's one more thing you should prepare for, Michael advised as our call was ending. Based on my experience with similar cases, when confronted, individuals who have engaged in this level of deception often attempt to flip the narrative, claiming they were forced into these actions by some fault of their spouse. Begin documenting your own activities now, establishing clear timelines and evidence of your movements and communications. It may seem unnecessary, but such documentation can be invaluable if he attempts to create false counter-narratives. After ending the call, I sat in silence, absorbing everything I'd learned. Charlotte slept peacefully beside me, oblivious to the strategic warfare being planned around her future security. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on my shoulders, but rather than feeling crushed by it, I found myself standing straighter. Julia returned with lunch, taking one look at my face and sitting down beside me. What did you learn? More than I wanted to know, I admitted. This isn't impulsive, Julia. Nathan's been planning this for over a year, since I got pregnant. He's been moving money, hiding income, and now transferring assets. The house is just one piece of a larger exit strategy. Julia's expression darkened with anger. That absolute bastard, using your pregnancy as cover while he dismantled your financial security. The timing was strategic, I agreed, a cold clarity settling over me. He knew I was distracted with prenatal appointments and nursery preparations. He knew I trusted him to handle our finances while I focused on the baby. He exploited that trust systematically. What's the plan now? Julia asked. I outlined the strategy developed with my newly assembled team. 2 weeks of gathering evidence while maintaining the illusion of normalcy, followed by coordinated legal action once we had tracked as many hidden assets as possible. Can you really do that? Julia wondered. Pretend everything is normal around him? I looked down at Charlotte, drawing strength from her peaceful presence. For her, I can do anything. Besides, Nathan has been acting for over a year. Now, it's my turn to give the performance of a lifetime. Julia squeezed my hand supportively. The difference is, You're acting to protect your child. He's acting to abandon his. The distinction resonated deeply. Every step I was taking, the deception, the strategic planning, the careful documentation, was in service of securing Charlotte's future and holding accountable the man who had attempted to undermine it before she even drew her first breath. As evening approached and Nathan's return to the hospital grew imminent, I mentally prepared myself for the role I needed to play. No longer was I simply Elise Donovan, new mother recovering from childbirth. I was now also detective, strategist, and protector, gathering evidence while projecting an image of vulnerability and ignorance. When Nathan arrived carrying takeout from my favorite restaurant and a small stuffed bear for Charlotte, I greeted him with a tired smile that revealed nothing of the fire burning beneath my surface. The game had changed, but he didn't know it yet. And in that knowledge lay my power. A power I intended to wield with precision and purpose when the moment came to reveal that his betrayal had been witnessed, documented, and would soon be answered with the full force of justice. The hospital discharge on Thursday morning arrived with a surreal quality. Nurses helped me gather our belongings and provided final instructions for Charlotte's care, while Nathan loaded our bags into the car with an attentiveness that now felt like an elaborate performance. I sat in the wheelchair holding Charlotte, a hospital policy for all new mothers regardless of their physical condition, watching him move efficiently through the discharge process. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Donovan?" the nurse asked cheerfully as she wheeled us toward the exit. Home. The word caught in my throat. The place I had lovingly prepared for Charlotte's arrival was now legally no longer mine, according to the fraudulent documents Nathan had executed. Yet I smiled and nodded, maintaining the facade that had become my primary defense strategy. "More than ready," I replied, exchanging a knowing glance with Julia, who was following with the remaining bags. We had spent the previous evening carefully planning for this transition. What to say, what to do, and most importantly, how to secure additional evidence without alerting Nathan to my awareness. Nathan pulled the car around, carefully installing Charlotte's car seat with a precision that would have touched me just days earlier. Now I observed his actions with a detached analytical eye, noting how he projected the image of devoted father and husband, while systematically undermining the very foundation of our family. The drive home featured Nathan pointing out neighborhood landmarks to our days-old daughter, maintaining one-sided cheerful conversation as if to fill any potentially uncomfortable silence. I responded appropriately, asking about mail that might have arrived and updates from neighbors who knew we were expecting. "Mrs. Castillo from next door left a casserole," Nathan mentioned as we turned onto our street. "And your design team sent an enormous gift basket. Everyone's been really thoughtful." I nodded, gazing out the window at the spring blossoms on our tree-lined street. We had chosen this neighborhood specifically for its family-friendly atmosphere and proximity to good schools, another shared decision that now felt hollowed out by deception. As we pulled into the driveway of our craftsman-style home, I felt a pang of grief mixed with determination. This house represented years of dreams and plans. We had spent weekends painting rooms and planting gardens, discussing where our children would play and how we would age gracefully within these walls. Nathan had been beside me through all of it, apparently already calculating how to claim it, solely for himself when the time came. "Here we are," Nathan announced unnecessarily, killing the engine. "Charlotte's first homecoming." Julia caught my eye in the rearview mirror, her expression conveying silent support. We had agreed she would stay with us for the first few days, ostensibly to help with the baby while I recovered, but actually to assist in my evidence-gathering mission and provide witness to any concerning behavior. "I've got Charlotte," Nathan said, carefully removing the car seat. "Julia, can you help Elise inside? I don't want her carrying anything yet." The house looked exactly as I remembered, yet completely different through my new lens of awareness. The entryway where we'd hung family photos, the living room where we'd hosted game nights with friends, the kitchen we'd renovated together last year, all now settings in a psychological thriller I was living in real time. "I've set up a station in the living room with everything you might need," Nathan explained, carrying Charlotte's car seat to the carefully arranged area near the couch. "Diapers, wipes, burp cloths, water bottle for you. And I thought you might want to be near the TV during feedings." His thoughtfulness, which would have once seemed evidence of his devotion, now raised questions about motivation. Was this genuine care, or part of his performance? Did he feel any guilt about his actions, or was he simply maintaining appearances until his larger plan could unfold? "Thank you," I said, lowering myself carefully onto the couch. "That's perfect." "I'll make some tea," Julia offered, heading to the kitchen, where we had previously identified 2 potential locations for additional security cameras. Nathan busied himself bringing in the remaining bags while I sat with Charlotte, who had awakened and was gazing around with unfocused, newborn curiosity. Looking at her perfect features, I felt my resolve strengthen. Whatever happened next, whatever Nathan had planned, I would ensure that Charlotte's future remained secure. "Your mom texted," Nathan mentioned casually, setting down the last bag. "She and your dad are flying in next week to meet the baby. I told them to book their usual hotel since we'll still be adjusting to our new routine." My parents had died 5 years ago. The statement was so bizarrely false that for a moment I simply stared at him, wondering if I'd misheard. "Nathan?" I said carefully. "My parents died in the car accident in 2018. He froze, confusion crossing his features before being replaced by embarrassment. "God, I'm so sorry. I meant your Aunt Caroline. Sleep deprivation is making me say crazy things." The slip was jarring, not just the error itself, but the ease with which he recovered and redirected. Was this an innocent mistake born from exhaustion? Or evidence of juggling too many lies? I filed the incident away to share with Rebecca and Michael later. "Aunt Caroline is welcome any time," I replied smoothly, though I might need a few more days before hosting visitors. "Of course," Nathan agreed quickly. "Whatever you need, you're in charge of the schedule now. Charlotte's running the show." The first day at home established what would become our new normal. Nathan performing the role of attentive father and husband, me playing the part of unsuspecting new mother, and Julia observing it all while helping us plant additional security measures throughout the house. While Nathan made a grocery run that afternoon, Julia and I moved with practiced efficiency, installing 2 more small cameras in strategic locations, one in the home office where financial documents were kept, and another in the guest room that Nathan had been increasingly using as a private workspace in recent months. "These are even more discreet than the ones you already had," Julia noted as she helped me position the tiny camera on a bookshelf in the office, disguised as part of a small desk ornament. "He'll never notice them." "They link directly to my secure cloud storage," I explained, checking the angle on my phone. "Motion activated with audio capacity. If he's making calls or accessing documents when he thinks no one is listening, we'll have it recorded." Julia shook her head in amazement. "When did my sister become Jason Bourne?" "When someone tried to steal her daughter's future," I replied, my voice hardening. "Necessity is a powerful teacher." By evening, we had established our surveillance network, and I had secured copies of key documents Nathan had left accessible in the home office. Most revealing was a hidden folder on our shared computer, containing emails with a real estate attorney, different from the one we had used when purchasing the house. The correspondence discussed options for property division and asset protection strategies in advance of significant life changes. "He's been planning this for months," I told Rebecca during a secure call when Nathan was giving Charlotte her bath. "The emails go back to my second trimester, all discussing how to protect his assets, as if everything we built together belonged solely to him." "This is excellent documentation," Rebecca confirmed. "Keep gathering anything you can access without raising suspicion. The more evidence we have of premeditation, the stronger our position when we move to invalidate the fraudulent transfers. After Charlotte's feeding and bedtime routine, Nathan suggested we all watch a movie together, a semblance of normal family life that felt increasingly surreal. As we sat in the living room, Julia strategically took the armchair, forcing Nathan to sit beside me on the couch. The proximity to the man who had betrayed me made my skin crawl, but I leaned against him as I would have before, noting how he automatically put his arm around my shoulders. "This is nice," he murmured, kissing the top of my head. "Our first family movie night." I made a sound of agreement, focusing on the screen rather than the nausea rising in my throat. The contrast between this moment of performed intimacy and the calculated betrayal I had witnessed was so stark, it felt almost dissociative, as if I were observing someone else's life rather than living my own. Later, after Julia had retired to the guest room and Nathan and I prepared for bed, I faced the challenge I had been dreading most: sharing a bed with him. We had agreed that I would claim physical discomfort from childbirth as a reason to maintain some distance, but there was no avoiding the intimacy of our bedroom entirely without raising his suspicion. Dr. Patel said it will be at least 6 weeks before we can resume normal marital activities, I mentioned as I changed into pajamas in our bathroom, buying time. "I know," Nathan called back, his voice understanding. "No pressure at all. You just had a baby. Your body needs time to heal." When I emerged, he had arranged pillows into a supportive nest on my side of the bed and placed a glass of water on my nightstand. These small considerations made the magnitude of his betrayal even more confounding. How could someone perform such convincing acts of care while simultaneously orchestrating profound deception? I settled into bed, positioning myself near the eye edge, using extra pillows as a subtle barrier. Nathan respected the physical boundary, kissing me gently on the forehead before turning out his light. "Get some sleep while you can," he advised. "I'll handle the midnight feeding so you can rest." In the darkness, I lay awake listening to his breathing change as he drifted into sleep, apparently unburdened by guilt or anxiety. The man beside me was a stranger, someone capable of compartmentalizing his life so completely that he could betray me with methodical precision while maintaining a facade of loving support. The baby monitor glowed softly on my nightstand, showing Charlotte sleeping peacefully in her crib just across the hall. I focused on her image, drawing strength from her perfect innocence. Whatever psychological toll this charade exacted from me was worth enduring to protect her future. My phone vibrated silently with a text from Michael Torres. "Preliminary background completed. Need to discuss findings tomorrow. Available during your husband's scheduled work hours." I replied with a simple confirmation, then deleted the exchange. According to our established protocol. The message suggested Michael had already uncovered something significant, something he preferred to discuss rather than text about. As dawn approached and Charlotte woke for her feeding, I moved quietly to her room, lifting her from her crib with a sense of profound connection. While I nursed her in the rocking chair, watching her tiny features in the soft glow of the nightlight, I made her a silent promise. "I won't let him take what's yours," I whispered. "The truth has been recorded, the evidence is building, and when the moment comes to act, we'll be ready. This house, our security, the future we deserve, I'm fighting for all of it. And unlike him, I fight with truth on my side." Charlotte's eyes drifted closed as she continued nursing, unaware of the battle being waged around her. But one day, I would tell her this story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to resilience. I would teach her that our greatest strength often emerges precisely when someone expects us to be at our weakest, and that justice, while sometimes delayed, arrives with greater force when it has been meticulously prepared for. The morning routine established itself with a disconcerting domesticity. Nathan rose early, prepared coffee for everyone, and spent 30 minutes holding Charlotte before dressing for work. His performance of devoted fatherhood was flawless, taking photos to share with colleagues, changing diapers without complaint, speaking to our daughter in the gentle voice of someone truly besotted. "I'll be home by 5, he promised, kissing Charlotte's forehead before turning to me. "Call if you need anything at all. Client meetings can be rescheduled." I nodded, accepting his kiss with practiced ease. "We'll be fine. Julia's here and my recovery is going well." As soon as Nathan's car disappeared down the street, I exchanged a glance with Julia. "We have approximately 8 hours, I said, already moving toward my laptop. "Let's make them count." My first priority was connecting with Michael Torres, who had suggested his findings warranted direct discussion. Within minutes, his face appeared on my screen, expression professionally neutral, but with an undercurrent of concern that immediately heightened my alertness. "Mrs. Donovan," he began, "I appreciate your time this morning. I've completed preliminary background work on your husband's activities over the past 18 months, and there are several patterns you should be aware of." My stomach tightened. "Go ahead." Michael shared his screen, displaying a detailed timeline. "Let's start with the financial irregularities your accountant identified. The transfers to Meridian Consulting. I've traced this entity to a Delaware corporation established 20 months ago with a registered agent that specializes in privacy protection. Can you determine who actually controls it?" I asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Michael replied. "The beneficial ownership is concealed through several layers, but I've connected it to another entity called Phoenix Holdings, which purchased a property in Lake Forest 6 months ago." He showed me images of a modern townhouse in an upscale community about 40 minutes from our home. A sleek, minimalist space that looked nothing like the traditional aesthetic Nathan and I had always preferred. "Property records show it was purchased for cash," Michael continued. "No mortgage. The interior was completely renovated immediately after purchase. High-end finishes, custom closets, home office, nursery." The word landed like a physical blow. "Nursery?" I repeated. Michael nodded grimly. "Yes, and this is where the financial trail connects to other concerning patterns." He shifted to another document, a calendar visualization showing Nathan's movements based on credit card transactions, phone location data, and employment records I had provided. The highlighted dates show consistent presence at this Lake Forest property, typically on days when your prenatal appointment records indicate you were occupied with medical visits. There's also a pattern of evening visits, usually between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. on nights when he claimed to be working late. My mind raced to connect these revelations with memories. Nathan's increased work commitments during my pregnancy, his insistence that I didn't need to reschedule my medical appointments to accommodate his schedule, his frequent late nights, attributed to client emergencies. "Is he living a double life?" I asked directly, needing clarity despite dreading the answer. Michael hesitated. "I prefer to present evidence rather than interpretations, but the patterns suggest a significant investment in establishing a separate residence. There's more you should know." He shifted to another screen showing flight records and hotel reservations. "Your husband traveled to Phoenix 3 times in the past year, though his work calendar showed client meetings in Chicago for these dates. On each trip, he purchased 2 airline tickets and reserved hotel suites rather than standard rooms." The implications were unmistakable, yet Michael maintained professional restraint, allowing me to process the information without imposing conclusions. "Have you identified who might have accompanied him?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the thundering of my heart. "I have a strong lead," Michael confirmed. "Credit card records show restaurant charges consistently for 2 people on these trips. Several social media photographs from these establishments during the relevant timeframes show your husband dining with the same woman." He displayed several images, distant but clear enough to identify Nathan seated across from a woman with dark hair, their body language suggesting familiarity. In one photo, her hand rested atop his on the table. "Her name is Vanessa Mercer," Michael continued. age 32, employed as a pharmaceutical sales representative until approximately 7 months ago, when she apparently left her position. Her social media went largely dormant around the same time, though there are occasional posts that deliberately exclude location data. 7 months ago, when I had entered my second trimester, when we had announced our pregnancy publicly, when Nathan had begun suggesting I reduce my architectural project load to focus on my health and the baby's well-being. The timeline aligns with the property purchase and the acceleration of financial maneuvers, I noted, analytical thinking. Providing temporary insulation from emotional impact. Yes, Michael agreed. Based on delivery records and service appointments, the Lake Forest property was fully furnished and operational by January of this year, your 7th month of pregnancy. Another piece clicked into place: Nathan's unexplained absence during a weekend in January when he claimed to be at a financial planning conference in Milwaukee. He had returned unusually energized, attributing his good mood to productive sessions and networking opportunities. Is there any indication of Ms. Mercer's current status? I asked, the question deliberately vague, but Michael understood its implications. Her last gynecological appointment was at North Shore Medical Associates 4 weeks ago, he replied carefully. The practice specializes in high-risk obstetrics and maternal-fetal medicine. The revelation landed with stunning clarity. Nathan wasn't simply hiding assets or preparing to leave. He was establishing a parallel family, complete with another home and potentially another child on the way. The breathtaking scope of the deception momentarily overwhelmed my carefully maintained composure. Julia, who had been silently observing the call, placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. Breathe, Elise. Michael gave me a moment before continuing. There's one more significant finding. The law firm corresponding with Nathan about asset protection strategies also drafted a document filed with Cook County Court 2 months ago, a petition for name change for Vanessa Mercer to Vanessa Donovan, scheduled for approval next month. The audacity was almost incomprehensible. Not content with merely establishing a secret life, Nathan intended to install this woman as a replacement Mrs. Donovan, while I was focused on bringing our child into the world. Thank you, Michael, I managed, professional courtesy providing a script when my own words failed me. This is extremely valuable information. Please continue monitoring and advise of any new developments. After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence while Julia processed alongside me. The absolute calculation of it, she finally said, her voice tight with anger. He's been building a whole separate life while pretending to build one with you. The betrayal transcended financial deception or even infidelity. It was a comprehensive erasure of our shared reality, a negation not just of our marriage, but of my very existence in his imagined future. I need to speak with Rebecca, I said, finding focus in practical next steps. This changes our strategy. Rebecca's reaction was measured but decisive. This significantly strengthens your position legally while complicating the timeline. The existence of a second property and evidence of systematic deception about his whereabouts constitutes abandonment under family law statutes. Combined with the financial fraud we've already documented, we have grounds for emergency injunctions beyond what we initially anticipated. What do you recommend? I asked. We accelerate, she replied without hesitation. The name change petition suggests he's establishing a legal foundation for this alternate identity. Once that's in place, further asset transfers become more complex to unwind. I suggest we file for emergency injunctions tomorrow, rather than waiting the full 2 weeks we initially discussed. The prospect of confronting Nathan sooner than planned sent a jolt of anxiety through me, quickly replaced by resolute determination. What do we need to do to prepare? I'll finalize the emergency petitions today, Rebecca explained. They'll include invalidation of the fraudulent house transfer, freezing of all joint assets, and exclusive possession of the marital home for you and Charlotte. The evidence of his alternative residence undermines any claim he might make about needing to remain in your home. We spent the next hour reviewing documentation and preparing for various scenarios that might unfold once legal proceedings began. When Charlotte woke hungry from her nap, I took a break to feed her, the ordinary act of mothering creating a surreal contrast to the extraordinary circumstances unfolding around us. "He's created an entire shadow life," I told Julia as I nursed Charlotte. "Not just hiding money or having an affair. He's literally duplicating his existence with someone else." "The level of compartmentalization is almost pathological," Julia observed. "How does someone maintain that kind of deception without cracking?" The question crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate: the fundamental disconnect between the Nathan I thought I knew and the man revealed through this investigation. "I don't think he sees it as deception," I realized. "In his mind, he's entitled to create whatever reality serves him best. The rules that govern normal relationships, honesty, commitment, legal obligations, don't apply to him because he's special." The insight wasn't merely psychological, it was strategic. Understanding Nathan's self-perception would help me anticipate his reactions once confronted. "He'll be shocked that I discovered the truth," I continued, "not because he thought his methods were foolproof, but because he never truly considered my agency or capabilities. In his narrative, I'm a supporting character, not someone who could challenge his carefully constructed reality." This perspective strengthened my resolve. Nathan had underestimated me profoundly, dismissing me as a passive participant in my own life. That miscalculation would be his undoing. With Charlotte fed and settled, I returned to action mode, coordinating with Leah to expedite the financial documentation needed for tomorrow's filings. The forensic accountant had made significant progress tracking the diverted funds, identifying additional accounts and documenting irregular transactions that painted a clear picture of financial deception. "We've documented approximately $428,000 in hidden assets," Leah reported, "including the Lake Forest property, investment accounts, under Meridian Consulting, and offshore transfers to a Cayman Islands entity established last year." The amount staggered me. Nearly $500,000 systematically removed from our shared financial foundation, all while Nathan encouraged me to focus on nursery colors and childbirth preparation classes rather than our investment portfolio. "Will we be able to recover these funds?" I asked. "Most of them," Leah confirmed. "The documentation is comprehensive enough to establish fraudulent intent. The offshore accounts present greater challenges, but even those leave transaction records we can leverage in court." By late afternoon, our accelerated plan was taking shape. Rebecca would file emergency motions first thing tomorrow morning. Michael would continue surveillance of both Nathan and the Lake Forest property. Leah would prepare financial declarations documenting all identified assets and evidence of fraudulent transfers. My role was perhaps the most challenging, maintaining normalcy for one more evening while preparations for tomorrow's legal ambush continued behind the scenes. The thought of sharing another meal with Nathan, accepting his affection, and sleeping in the same house knowing the full scope of his betrayal required a level of performance I wasn't certain I could maintain. "You can do this," Julia assured me as we heard Nathan's car in the driveway. "One more night of playing your role, then he'll be playing defense for a change." As Nathan entered carrying takeout and flowers, "Just because you deserve them," he explained with a smile that now seemed grotesque in its inauthenticity, I channeled every ounce of self-control into presenting the image of contented new motherhood he expected to see. Over dinner, he shared stories from his workday, commented on Charlotte's apparent growth in just the few hours he'd been gone, and suggested a weekend drive to show our daughter the lakefront path where we used to walk during our early dating days. The casual planning for a family future he had systematically undermined created a cognitive dissonance that threatened to overwhelm my carefully maintained facade. Only by focusing on Charlotte, her needs, her future, the justice I was securing for her, could I maintain the performance required for a few more hours. As I prepared for bed that night, knowing it would be the last I would spend under the same roof as the man who had betrayed us so completely, I felt a surprising sense of calm certainty. Nathan had constructed an elaborate house of cards, assuming I would never discover its existence. Tomorrow, with a single legal filing, I would introduce the wind that would bring it all crashing down. Morning arrived with the crystalline clarity of purpose. I'd slept fitfully, hyper-aware of Nathan's presence beside me, but the discomfort of proximity to my betrayer was overshadowed by the knowledge that our positions would soon be dramatically reversed. As dawn broke, I slipped quietly from bed to tend to Charlotte, allowing Nathan to sleep until his alarm, his final hours of blissful ignorance. When he woke, the morning followed our newly established routine. Nathan prepared coffee while expressing amazement at Charlotte's alertness during her early feeding, followed by casual conversation about his day ahead. "I should be home around 6, he said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. "The Carson portfolio review shouldn't take long, and I've cleared my afternoon schedule to be back early." "That sounds nice," I replied, adjusting Charlotte against my shoulder. "We'll be here." He kissed Charlotte's head, then mine, his actions so convincingly affectionate that for a disorienting moment I questioned the evidence amassed against him. That momentary doubt vanished when he checked his phone, a subtle shift in his expression revealing genuine warmth as he read a message. Warmth that hadn't been present in his interactions with me. The front door had barely closed behind him when I turned to Julia. "It's time." Rebecca had advised me to leave the house during the legal filings to avoid any potential confrontation if Nathan discovered what was happening prematurely. Following this guidance, Julia and I prepared to spend the day at her apartment across town, packing essential items for Charlotte, while leaving no indication that my departure was anything but temporary. "The process server will deliver the papers to Nathan's office at 11:30, I confirmed with Rebecca during a brief call before leaving. "The emergency hearing is scheduled for 2 p.m., and the judge has already reviewed our preliminary evidence." "Everything is proceeding as planned," Rebecca assured me. "Judge Hernandez is known for taking financial fraud seriously, especially in cases involving newborns. The security footage alone is compelling enough for temporary orders, but with the additional documentation we've assembled, I anticipate comprehensive relief." After securing Charlotte in her car seat, I took a final look around the home Nathan had attempted to steal through forgery and fraud. Despite everything, this place represented years of my life, dreams, and hard work. I refused to allow his betrayal to taint my connection to these walls that had witnessed so much of my story. "I'll be back," I whispered, not as a question, but as a promise to myself and the home we had built. Julia drove while I sat in the back with Charlotte, my phone set to receive updates from our legal team throughout the day. The city passed by. In a blur of spring greenery and urban congestion, my attention focused on the unfolding strategy rather than the familiar landmarks. At Julia's apartment, we established a command center of sorts. Laptops open, phones charged, documents organized for quick reference. Charlotte, sensing the focused energy around her, remained remarkably calm, drifting between contented alertness and peaceful sleep. "Update from Michael," Julia announced, checking my secure email. "Nathan arrived at his office at 8:45 a.m. No unusual movements or communications detected." I nodded, imagining Nathan at his desk, reviewing client portfolios and making calls, entirely unaware that his carefully constructed facade was about to shatter. The image brought neither joy nor satisfaction, only a steady resolve to correct an injustice that threatened my daughter's future. At precisely 11:32 a.m., Rebecca sent a brief text. "Papers served. Proceeding with court filing now." The moment felt simultaneously momentous and anticlimactic, a quiet notification marking the beginning of a seismic shift in our lives. I pictured Nathan's face as he was handed the legal documents in his glass-walled office, the gradual transformation from confusion to shock to panic as he comprehended that his deception had been discovered and documented. "Do you think he'll contact you immediately?" Julia asked, voicing the question I'd been considering. "He'll try," I replied, checking that my phone remained on silent mode. But Rebecca was clear that any communication should go through attorneys. Once papers are served, responding directly could complicate the legal proceedings. Sure enough, within minutes my phone lit up with Nathan's call. I let it ring through to voicemail, then watched as text messages began arriving in rapid succession. 11:41 a.m. "Elise, call me immediately. There's been a misunderstanding." 11:43 a.m. "These allegations are completely false. We need to talk." 11:47 a.m. "Please answer your phone. This is insane." 11:52 a.m. "Where are you? Are you with Julia? This isn't what you think." The escalating desperation in his messages confirmed what Rebecca had predicted. When confronted with evidence of his actions, Nathan would attempt to control the narrative through direct contact, bypassing legal channels to leverage emotional connection. "He's following the typical pattern," I noted to Julia, showing her the messages. "First denial, then minimization, now attempting to locate me physically." "Are you okay?" Julia asked, studying my face with concern. Seeing his reaction must be difficult, even knowing what he did. The question gave me pause. Was I okay? The man I had built a life with, the father of my child, was now sending increasingly frantic messages as his dual existence collapsed around him. Yet, rather than grief or anger, I felt a surprising sense of clarity, as if the final pieces of a complex puzzle were locking into place, revealing the complete picture I'd been working to understand. I'm better than okay, I realized. I'm finally seeing the situation with absolute clarity. Every message he sends confirms the type of person he truly is. Someone who believed he was entitled to betray me because he never anticipated I would have the capacity to discover the truth, much less take decisive action to protect myself. And Charlotte. At 12:18 p.m., a different type of notification arrived. An email from Michael Torres with a subject line that read simply, "Urgent update." The attached photos showed Nathan leaving his office building in obvious haste, his expression a mixture of panic and anger as he spoke on his phone while striding toward the parking garage. "He's on the move," Michael's message noted. "Heading toward Lake Forest property based on current direction, continuing surveillance." The development wasn't entirely unexpected. Rebecca had anticipated that Nathan might seek to secure his secondary residence and potentially contact Vanessa Mercer once the legal proceedings were initiated. This possibility had been factored into our strategy, with a second process server prepared to deliver papers to the Lake Forest address if necessary. "He's running to his other life," Julia observed, a note of disgust in her voice. "Not running," I corrected. "Attempting to salvage. He still believes he can contain this situation, protect his parallel existence while finding a way to discredit or undermine our legal action." The next hours unfolded with the measured pace of methodical justice. Michael provided regular updates tracking Nathan's movements to the Lake Forest property, while Rebecca prepared for the emergency hearing. Leah forwarded confirmation that all identified financial accounts associated with Nathan had been frozen pending the judge's ruling, a standard procedure in cases involving documented fraud. At 1:45 p.m., Rebecca called to review final details before entering the courtroom. The judge has already reviewed the video evidence and financial documentation. These emergency hearings typically last less than 30 minutes. Given the strength of our evidence, I anticipate favorable rulings on all requested relief. "What happens after the judge rules?" I asked, bouncing Charlotte gently as she began to fuss. "Assuming we receive the orders requested, they take effect immediately," Rebecca explained. "The house title will be provisionally restored to joint ownership pending final divorce settlement. You'll have exclusive possession of the marital residence. All marital assets remain frozen except for a reasonable monthly allowance for living expenses. Most importantly, a temporary restraining order will prevent Nathan from removing, transferring, or concealing any additional assets. The legal machinery was now in full motion, transforming the private betrayal I had discovered into a matter of public record and judicial intervention. There was something powerfully validating about this transition. Objective authorities reviewing the evidence and applying legal remedies to the harm Nathan had attempted to inflict. One more thing, Rebecca added. Given Nathan's pattern of deception and the existence of the second residence, I've also requested temporary emergency custody of Charlotte with supervised visitation for Nathan. This is standard procedure when one parent has demonstrated financial fraud and deceptive behavior. The thought of Nathan having any contact with Charlotte sent a protective surge through me. Is supervised visitation necessary, given everything he's done? Courts generally maintain that children benefit from relationships with both parents, even in difficult circumstances, Rebecca replied gently. The supervision requirement provides significant protection while acknowledging his legal rights as a father. We can revisit this arrangement during full custody proceedings based on his behavior going forward. Though uncomfortable, I recognize the wisdom in Rebecca's approach. Despite everything, Nathan was Charlotte's father. My goal wasn't to erase him from her life, but to ensure her security and well-being despite his actions. At precisely 2:37 p.m., Rebecca's call came through. We've been granted all requested relief, she reported, professional satisfaction evident in her voice. Judge Hernandez was particularly moved by the timing of the fraud during your childbirth. The orders are being processed now and will be effective immediately. Relief washed over me in a powerful wave. The home Nathan had attempted to steal was legally protected. The financial resources he had hidden were identified and frozen. The parallel life he had constructed was now exposed to legal scrutiny. Most importantly, Charlotte's security was being restored through the methodical application of justice. When can we return home? I asked, the question carrying layers of meaning beyond its practical implications. The orders include exclusive possession effective immediately, Rebecca confirmed. However, I recommend waiting until we've confirmed Nathan has been served with the judge's orders and understands he's legally prohibited from entering the property. Without court permission. Julia squeezed my hand supportively. See? He thought he was so clever, but justice moves faster than his schemes. As if in response to Julia's observation, Michael's update arrived. Subject has received notification of court orders while at Lake Forest property. Currently observed in heated phone conversation, presumably with legal counsel. No indication of imminent departure from secondary residence. The image of Nathan trapped in his alternate home, surrounded by evidence of his dual life while receiving legal notification that his scheme had collapsed, carried a certain poetic justice. The very space he had established as a sanctuary from accountability had become the setting for his reckoning. My phone, which had been steadily accumulating ignored messages from Nathan throughout the day, fell silent. His lawyers had presumably advised him that direct contact now constituted a violation of the court order, potentially complicating his already precarious legal position. By early evening, Michael confirmed that Nathan remained at the Lake Forest property with no signs of intended departure. With this assurance, Rebecca advised that it was safe to return to my home, a return that represented not just physical reoccupation, but a reclamation of what was rightfully mine. As Julia drove us back across the city, Charlotte sleeping peacefully in her car seat, I watched the familiar landmarks with new eyes. The sky was turning the deep purple blue of early evening, streetlights beginning to illuminate our path home. The day had transformed everything, replacing uncertainty with clarity, vulnerability with legal protection, and betrayal with the first steps toward justice. You know what amazes me most? I said to Julia as we turned onto our street. Not that he betrayed me, but that he so profoundly underestimated me. He truly believed I would never discover the truth, never take action, never fight back. His biggest mistake, Julia agreed as we pulled into the driveway of the home that was once again legally mine. No, I corrected, looking at Charlotte's peaceful face. His biggest mistake was believing his actions wouldn't have consequences. Today was just the beginning of proving how wrong he was. Stepping back into my home carried an emotional weight I hadn't anticipated. The familiar entryway, the living room where Charlotte's infant seat waited, the kitchen with its morning coffee cups still in the sink. Everything looked exactly as we had left it mere hours ago, yet the context had fundamentally transformed. This was no longer a space contaminated by Nathan's betrayal, but a sanctuary secured through decisive action. "Welcome home," Julia said softly, carrying Charlotte's car seat inside while I stood momentarily frozen in the doorway. Home. The word resonated differently now. This house, which Nathan had attempted to steal through forgery and fraud, was officially restored to shared legal ownership with exclusive possession granted to Charlotte and me. The court orders had effectively exorcised his presumptive claim, returning the space to its rightful inhabitants. "It feels different," I observed, crossing the threshold with deliberate steps. "It should," Julia replied. "This morning you left as someone being deceived. You've returned as someone who took control." That distinction captured precisely what had changed, not the physical space, but my relationship to it. The transformation wasn't about the legal orders, though they provided essential protection. It was about reclaiming not just property, but personal agency. As we settled back in, Rebecca called with additional updates. "The financial injunctions are fully implemented," she reported. "All identified accounts are frozen pending further court proceedings. Nathan's attorneys have requested an emergency hearing to contest the orders, but that won't happen until next week at the earliest." "Has he made any statements through his lawyers?" I asked, curious about how he was positioning his defense. "They're claiming misunderstanding rather than fraud," Rebecca replied, professional skepticism evident in her tone. "According to their initial communication, the house transfer was part of a tax planning strategy that you had verbally approved but wasn't properly documented. They're characterizing this as an administrative error rather than intentional deception." The audacity of this defense wasn't surprising, but its transparent weakness confirmed that Nathan's legal position was as precarious as Rebecca had anticipated. No judge would find a tax planning strategy that conveniently occurred during childbirth, executed with forged signatures and false claims of power of attorney, to be a mere administrative oversight. "What about the Lake Forest property and his relationship with Vanessa Mercer?" I asked. "They haven't addressed those aspects yet," Rebecca said. "Strategic silence, presumably while they attempt to construct some explanation that doesn't amount to admission of a double life. The existence of that property and his documented presence there significantly undermines any claim that he requires access to your home." After ending the call, I focused on re-establishing normal routines for Charlotte, feeding, changing, the gentle rhythms of newborn care that continued regardless of legal proceedings or emotional upheaval. There was something grounding about these simple, essential tasks, a reminder that beneath the complex adult drama, fundamental needs remained straightforward. As evening settled around us, Julia helped me secure the house, changing lock codes, reviewing security camera positions, ensuring all entry points were properly protected. We had no specific reason to believe Nathan would violate the court order prohibiting him from entering the property, but his pattern of entitlement suggested prudent precautions were warranted. Michael confirmed he's still at the Lake Forest address, Julia noted, checking the latest update. "Apparently, several delivery food orders have arrived. He seems to be settling in for the night there." The image of Nathan confined to his alternate residence, the very space he had established for his parallel life, carried a certain symmetry. The sanctuary he had created for deception had become a gilded cage, the only property he could now legally access. After Julia left for the night, promising to return first thing in the morning, I found myself alone with Charlotte for the first time since discovering Nathan's betrayal. The house felt larger somehow, the silence more profound, as if the absence of pretense created additional space. I carried Charlotte from room to room in a slow, deliberate tour, speaking to her in the soft, one-sided conversation of new motherhood. "This is our home," I told her as we moved through the living room where family photos still displayed happier times. "Your father tried to take it from us, but we've reclaimed it. One day I'll explain everything to you, not to burden you with adult complexities, but to teach you that you never have to accept betrayal as your destiny." In the nursery, meticulously prepared during my pregnancy with what I had believed was Nathan's loving participation, I sat in the rocking chair with Charlotte against my shoulder. The mint green walls with their carefully stenciled woodland creatures now seemed like artifacts from a different life. One where I had believed in partnership rather than knowing the reality of calculation. "We'll make new memories here," I promised her, gently rubbing her back as she drifted toward sleep. Ones built on truth rather than illusion. Charlotte's nursery camera alert chimed softly on my phone. The same security system that had captured Nathan's betrayal, now documenting this moment of quiet resolution. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Technology designed for protection had served precisely that purpose, though in ways I never anticipated when installing it. After settling Charlotte in her crib, I moved through the master bedroom with newfound purpose, reclaiming space that had been contaminated by Nathan's presence. I changed the bedding completely, moved his personal items into the guest room closet as Rebecca had advised, preserving his property while removing it from shared spaces, and rearranged furniture to create a configuration that felt distinctly mine. The physical reorganization paralleled an internal one, establishing new boundaries, defining spaces of self-determination, creating distance from patterns that had enabled deception. With each deliberate change, I was not merely redecorating, but reconstructing my environment to reflect my reclaimed agency. When my phone chimed with a notification from an unknown number, I approached it cautiously. The message read simply, "This isn't over. We need to talk directly. Legal mechanisms can't resolve personal matters." Though the number was unfamiliar, the phrasing and presumption were unmistakably Nathan's. He had apparently obtained a new phone, likely to circumvent the blocks I'd placed on his known numbers following Rebecca's advice. The attempt to establish direct communication outside legal channels was precisely what she had warned might happen, an effort to regain psychological control when formal authority had been lost. Rather than responding, I forwarded the message to Rebecca with a brief note. "Received from unknown number. Appears to be Nathan attempting contact in violation of communication protocols." Her reply came quickly. "Do not engage. Documented violation of court-ordered communication restrictions. Will address with judge tomorrow." The exchange reinforced something essential about my new reality. I was no longer navigating betrayal alone, but with professional advocates and clear legal protections. Nathan's message, intended to create direct engagement on his terms, instead became additional evidence strengthening my position. Later that night, after Charlotte's midnight feeding, I found myself drawn to the home office where our important documents were stored. The room where security footage had captured Nathan accessing and manipulating financial records now served a different purpose, becoming the center of my reclamation project. I systematically reviewed our files, creating an inventory of documents, accounts, and legal instruments that required attention. Beyond the immediate asset freeze secured through court orders, there were numerous long-term financial considerations: retirement accounts where Nathan remained listed as beneficiary, insurance policies requiring beneficiary changes, estate, planning documents that needed revision. The process wasn't merely administrative, but profoundly liberating. Each identified vulnerability became an opportunity for correction. Each discovered connection a chance to establish appropriate boundaries. What might have felt overwhelming in isolation became manageable through systematic approach and clear purpose. As dawn approached, I had compiled a comprehensive catalog of actions required to fully disentangle my financial future from Nathan's ongoing influence. The list was substantial, but not insurmountable, each item representing a specific, achievable step toward complete independence. Charlotte woke for her early morning feeding as the first light filtered through the windows. Holding her in the changing morning light, I realized that the past 24 hours had fundamentally altered our trajectory. When the sun had risen yesterday, I had been living in carefully orchestrated deception, married to a man constructing a shadow life. Today, though the legal proceedings were just beginning, truth had replaced illusion, and action had superseded victimhood. "Everything is different now," I told Charlotte, as she gazed up with unfocused newborn attention. "Yesterday, I discovered that your father tried to steal our home while I was bringing you into the world. Today I can tell you that his plan failed because he underestimated what we're capable of." The simplicity of this statement belied the complex emotions beneath it. Grief for what had been lost, anger at the betrayal, fear for the uncertain path ahead. Yet those emotions no longer dominated my experience. They had been contextualized within a larger narrative of capability and agency. As the morning progressed, updates from our legal team confirmed that the court orders remained firmly in place, despite Nathan's attorney's preliminary objections. All identified assets remained frozen. The house title restoration was proceeding through proper channels, and his prohibited contact attempt had been formally documented as a violation to be addressed at the upcoming hearing. "The judge has scheduled a full review for Tuesday morning," Rebecca informed me during our morning update call. "Nathan will be required to appear in person to address both the substantive allegations and his violation of communication protocols. The court has made it exceptionally clear that further violations will result in significant consequences." The systematic implementation of legal protections created space for me to focus on Charlotte's needs and my own emotional processing. Each feeding, diaper change, and quiet moment of connection with my daughter became an anchor in rapidly changing circumstances, reminders of what ultimately mattered beyond legal proceedings and financial calculations. Midday brought an unexpected delivery, a careful selection of meals prepared by Julia's co-workers, organized through a meal train she had quietly arranged. The thoughtful gesture underscored another essential aspect of reclamation: accepting support without shame or hesitation. "People want to help," Julia explained when she arrived with additional provisions. "Everyone I've told is amazed by your strength and wants to contribute in whatever way they can." This perspective challenged my initial instinct to handle everything independently, a pattern that I realized had potentially enabled Nathan's deception by creating space for unexamined trust. True strength wasn't found in isolation, but in discerning partnership and community support. As the day unfolded with additional legal updates, practical arrangements, and the constant care Charlotte required, I found myself increasingly centered in a new understanding of resilience. The capacity to withstand betrayal wasn't measured by emotional imperviousness, but by responsive adaptation and decisive action. Each room I moved through, each decision I made, each boundary I established, contributed to a profound reclamation, not just of physical space or legal rights, but of the narrative itself. What Nathan had intended as my erasure had instead catalyzed my emergence as the author of my own story, one where his betrayal became merely a chapter rather than the conclusion. The weekend passed in a carefully structured routine of newborn care interspersed with legal consultations and continued documentation of Nathan's financial machinations. By Sunday evening, the immediate shock of discovery had settled into a focused determination that guided each decision and interaction. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. Rebecca called just after I'd finished Charlotte's first feeding of the day, her typically measured tone carrying an undercurrent of urgency. "We've received communication from someone claiming to be Nathan's former assistant at Meridian Financial," she explained. "She's requesting to speak with you directly regarding information she believes is relevant to your case." "Former assistant?" I questioned, mentally cataloging Nathan's workplace relationships. He's never mentioned having a dedicated assistant at the firm. That's one of several inconsistencies, Rebecca replied. According to our preliminary background check, the woman, Diane Winters, worked for Meridian Financial for approximately 18 months before resigning abruptly 3 weeks ago. Her timing correlates with your delivery date. The coincidence seemed significant. Do you think she's legitimate? Her employment at Meridian is confirmed, Rebecca said carefully. What's unclear is her motivation for coming forward now, and why she's specifically requesting direct contact rather than providing information through formal channels. After discussing security protocols and establishing appropriate boundaries, we arranged for Diane to meet me at Rebecca's office that afternoon. Julia agreed to watch Charlotte, allowing me to focus entirely on whatever information might emerge. The law offices of Santos & Partners occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, their reception area designed to convey both professionalism and approachable competence. Rebecca met me at the elevator, her usual professional attire complemented by a warmth that had developed over our intense collaboration. Diane arrived early, she noted, guiding me toward a conference room. She appears nervous but composed. My investigator's preliminary check shows no concerning connections to Nathan beyond her former employment. She's 34, divorced, no children, has worked in financial services for approximately 9 years. Through the glass wall of the odd conference room, I could see a woman with short auburn hair wearing a navy blazer over a simple white blouse. She sat with perfect posture, hands folded on the table before her, her expression suggesting someone who had made a difficult decision and was committed to seeing it through. Rebecca entered first, making introductions with practiced ease. Ms. Winters, thank you for coming. This is Elise Donovan. Diane stood immediately, extending her hand with a firm grip that conveyed both professionalism and a hint of anxiety. Mrs. Donovan, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. As we settled across from each other, I noticed details that spoke to careful preparation, the leather portfolio before her, the precision of her manicure, the quality watch visible at her wrist. This was someone accustomed to attention to detail and presentation. Ms. Winters has agreed that this conversation can be recorded for potential evidentiary purposes, Rebecca explained, activating the conference room's discreet recording system. She understands this may become part of legal proceedings. Diane nodded confirmation. I do. That's partly why I wanted to provide this information directly. There should be no question about its source or my willingness to verify it under oath if necessary. The formal acknowledgement established, Diane opened her portfolio and extracted a USB drive, placing it carefully on the table between us. I worked as Nathan Donovan's executive assistant at Meridian Financial from January of last year until 3 weeks ago, she began, her voice steady despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. My official role involved calendar management, client communications, and administrative support for his portfolio management responsibilities. She paused, seeming to measure her next words carefully. Approximately 6 months into my employment, the nature of my responsibilities began to change. Mr. Donovan increasingly involved me in matters that seemed outside standard financial management, establishing new LLCs, coordinating with attorneys specializing in asset protection, managing communications with offshore banking contacts. The timeline aligned precisely with the evidence our financial investigation had uncovered, the period when Nathan's systematic diversion of assets had accelerated. At first, I assumed these activities were legitimate aspects of high-net-worth client services, Diane continued. Mr. Donovan explained them as specialized wealth management strategies for select clients requiring exceptional privacy. As his assistant, maintaining confidentiality was core to my responsibilities. Her gaze met mine directly. It wasn't until I was asked to notarize documents with signatures I hadn't witnessed that I began questioning the legitimacy of these activities. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Notarized signatures you hadn't witnessed? Yes, Diane confirmed. I maintain a notary commission as part of my professional qualifications. Initially, Mr. Donovan would have clients sign documents in my presence, following proper protocol. Over time, he began presenting documents already signed, asking me to notarize them after the fact. When I expressed concern about this practice, he assured me the signatures were legitimate and the clients had authorized the expedited process. The implications were immediately clear. If Diane had notarized documents with forged signatures, potentially, including my own, her notary commission and professional reputation were compromised, possibly exposing her to legal liability. What specific documents did you notarize without witnessing the signatures? Rebecca asked, her tone neutral but precise. Diane's composure wavered slightly. Property transfers, power of attorney declarations, trust documents. She glanced at me apologetically. Including papers related to your home title transfer 3 days ago. Though we had already discovered and legally addressed the fraudulent transfer, having confirmation from someone directly involved in executing the deception provided powerful validation. Mr. Donovan assured me you had signed the documents earlier but couldn't be present for notarization due to being in the hospital after childbirth, Diane continued. He presented what appeared to be a valid power of attorney authorizing him to complete the transaction on your behalf. I never signed any power of attorney, I stated firmly. I believe you, Diane replied immediately. After notarizing those documents, I began researching previous transactions where similar protocols were followed. What I discovered suggested a pattern of misrepresentation that extended well beyond administrative shortcuts. She indicated the USB drive on the table. This contains copies of all documents I notarized for Mr. Donovan over the past year, along with corresponding client files, email communications, and calendar entries. I've highlighted instances where proper notarization procedures weren't followed, or where subsequent evidence suggested possible forgery or misrepresentation. The potential value of this evidence was enormous, not just for my case, but potentially for other clients whose signatures may have been forged on legal documents. Why are you coming forward now? Rebecca asked, the essential question that would help establish Diane's credibility and motivation. Diane's professional demeanor softened, slightly, revealing the human concerns beneath. 3 factors, she replied with candid directness. First, learning that the home title transfer occurred while you were in childbirth crossed a line that made it impossible to maintain any illusion about the ethical nature of these activities. Second, I discovered that Mr. Donovan had established accounts in my name without my knowledge or consent, potentially implicating me in financial activities I had no awareness of. And third, she hesitated, then continued with evident discomfort. I learned that Mr. Donovan has a history of involving his assistants in progressively compromising activities, then using that compromise to ensure their silence through implied or explicit threats. This revelation suggested a pattern beyond what we had already uncovered, a systematic approach to creating complicity that prevented disclosure. How did you learn about this history? Rebecca pressed gently. I was contacted by Amanda Reyes, who worked as Mr. Donovan's assistant before me, Diane explained. She reached out after seeing my resignation announcement on LinkedIn. Her experience mirrored mine in disturbing ways. Gradual involvement in questionable activities, followed by increased isolation from other firm employees, and eventual dependence on Mr. Donovan for professional references and continued employment. This potential pattern of manipulation extended the scope of Nathan's deception beyond our marriage and financial affairs into his professional conduct, suggesting a comprehensive strategy of control and exploitation across multiple domains. Ms. Reyes has indicated willingness to provide her own statement, Diane added, extracting a business card from her portfolio. She's relocated to Seattle, but has authorized me to share her contact information. As the meeting continued, Diane provided detailed context for specific documents and transactions, creating a comprehensive picture of Nathan's systematic manipulation of financial and legal instruments over at least 18 months. The precision of her documentation and clarity of her recollection suggested someone with both professional thoroughness and personal integrity. "There's one more thing you should know," Diane said as our meeting was concluding. "The Lake Forest property purchased through Phoenix Holdings, the documentation listed it as an investment property for a client named Vincent Mercer. However, I later discovered this client doesn't exist in Meridian's system. The name appears to be constructed from Vanessa Mercer's family connection. This additional layer of deception, creating a fictitious client to obscure the true ownership of the Lake Forest property, further demonstrated the calculated nature of Nathan's actions. "Thank you for coming forward," I said as we prepared to conclude the meeting. "I understand the professional and personal risk involved in providing this information." Diane's expression reflected both resolution and lingering concern. The risk of remaining silent ultimately became greater than the risk of disclosure. What Mr. Donovan is doing isn't just unethical, it's illegal and harmful to multiple parties, including, potentially, your daughter. The mention of Charlotte brought the stakes into sharp focus. Nathan's deception threatened not just my financial security, but the foundation of our daughter's future. After Diane departed with arrangements to provide formal deposition later that week, Rebecca and I remained in the conference room reviewing the extensive documentation she had provided. "This significantly strengthens our position," Rebecca observed, scanning through the organized files. "Beyond confirming what we already suspected about the house transfer, it establishes a pattern of similar conduct with multiple clients and deliberate creation of compromised witnesses. Was the implications extended beyond my individual case to potential financial crimes affecting other Meridian clients? Do we have an obligation to report this to regulatory authorities?" I asked. "Yes," Rebecca confirmed. "The evidence suggests securities fraud and potentially other financial crimes that fall under mandatory reporting requirements. I've already contacted our firm's compliance specialist to review proper protocols." As comprehensive as our investigation had been, Diane's evidence revealed additional layers of deception we hadn't yet uncovered, suggesting that Nathan's capacity for compartmentalization and fraud exceeded even our expanded understanding of his character. "What does this mean for tomorrow's hearing?" I asked, focusing on the immediate implications. "It transforms the landscape completely," Rebecca replied with professional satisfaction. "Rather than contesting specific transfers or temporary orders, Nathan will be facing evidence of systematic financial fraud, potentially affecting multiple clients. His attorneys will likely request continuance to review this new evidence, but the judge is unlikely to lift any of the protective orders already in place." The strategic advantage was clear. What had begun as a focused legal response to specific fraudulent actions had expanded into a comprehensive case that threatened not just Nathan's marital assets, but his professional standing and potentially his freedom. Driving home from the meeting, I experienced a complex mixture of validation and disturbance. Diane's evidence confirmed that my discovery of Nathan's betrayal wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systematic pattern extending throughout his professional and personal life. The calculated nature of his deception, involving not just me but colleagues and clients, painted a portrait of someone fundamentally committed to manipulation as a lifestyle rather than a momentary lapse. Yet within this disturbing expansion of understanding came a profound liberation. The comprehensive nature of Nathan's deception removed any lingering questions about my role or responsibility in his choices. His behavior reflected a character pattern entirely independent of my actions or our relationship, a pattern he had established long before attempting to steal our home during Charlotte's birth. Arriving home to Julia and Charlotte, I felt an unexpected lightness despite the serious implications of what I'd learned. The burden of questioning, wondering what I might have missed or how I might have prevented the betrayal, had been lifted by the evidence of Nathan's systematic deception across multiple relationships and contexts. "How did it go?" Julia asked. As I gathered Charlotte into my arms, breathing in her newborn scent with renewed appreciation for the uncomplicated truth of our connection. "It was illuminating," I replied, settling into the rocking chair with Charlotte against my shoulder. It turns out Nathan's betrayal of me was just one expression of a much larger pattern. He's been doing this professionally, personally, systematically. Julia's expression reflected concern. "That sounds worse, not better." "In some ways, it is worse," I acknowledged. "The scope of deception is larger than we imagined. But it's also clarifying. This was never about me, or us, or our marriage. It was about who he fundamentally is, someone constructed around deception and control." This recognition carried profound freedom, not from the practical challenges ahead or the emotional impact of betrayal, but from any lingering self-doubt about what I might have done differently. Nathan's actions reflected his character, not my worthiness or capacity for relationship. As Charlotte drifted to sleep against my shoulder, I contemplated the path ahead with newfound clarity. Tomorrow's hearing would likely be just the beginning of a complex legal process addressing not only our marital dissolution, but potentially criminal charges arising from Nathan's professional conduct. Yet within that complexity, my own direction had become remarkably clear. Protect Charlotte, secure our future, and continue the process of reclamation that had begun the moment I witnessed Nathan's betrayal on the security footage. His actions had revealed not just who he was, but, in the crucible of response, who I was becoming. Someone capable of facing devastating truth, taking decisive action, and reconstructing a foundation built on authenticity rather than illusion. Tuesday morning arrived with the crystalline clarity that follows a night of resolute purpose. I had slept surprisingly well, Charlotte waking only once for her midnight feeding before returning to peaceful slumber. It seemed my daughter had somehow absorbed my newfound determination, her tiny being aligned with my strengthened resolve. As morning sunlight filtered through the nursery blinds, I dressed with deliberate care, selecting a tailored navy suit that projected both professional competence and appropriate gravity. Today marked my first face-to-face encounter with Nathan since discovering his betrayal, and while the courtroom setting provided structured protection, the emotional challenge required careful preparation. "You look ready for battle," Julia observed, taking Charlotte from my arms so I could secure a small pearl necklace, a graduation gift from our mother that had always symbolized achievement and capability to me. "Not battle," I corrected. "Testimony. There's a difference. Battles are chaotic. Testimony is ordered truth-telling." Rebecca had arranged for us to arrive at the courthouse through a private entrance, minimizing the possibility of unplanned encounters with Nathan or press attention. The family court building, with its imposing limestone facade and formal corridors, created an appropriately solemn atmosphere for the proceedings ahead. Judge Hernandez has already reviewed Diane Winter's preliminary statement and supporting documentation, Rebecca informed me as we settled in a private conference room. He's authorized expanded questioning based on the new evidence, which significantly alters the scope of today's hearing. The original purpose, reviewing emergency orders regarding the house title and asset freeze, had evolved into a more comprehensive examination of Nathan's potential financial and legal misconduct. What might have been a relatively brief procedural hearing now carried the weight of potential criminal implications. Nathan's attorneys requested a continuance to review the new evidence, Rebecca continued. The judge denied that request, but has permitted them 90 minutes of preparation time this morning. They're clearly rattled by the expanded scope. This strategic advantage, Nathan's team scrambling to address evidence they hadn't anticipated, created a power shift that felt appropriately balanced against his months of calculated deception. When we entered the courtroom at precisely 11 Howard a.m., I maintained deliberate focus on the judicial bench rather than allowing my gaze to drift toward where Nathan would be seated with his legal team. This wasn't avoidance, but strategic composure, preserving my emotional equilibrium for the testimony ahead. Judge Hernandez, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating dark eyes, established the tone immediately. These proceedings involve serious allegations of fraud, forgery, and financial misconduct, he noted, surveying the courtroom with evident gravity. While technically a family court matter, the evidence presented suggests potential criminal violations that may require referral to appropriate authorities. All parties should understand the significance of truthfulness in this context. The judge's opening remarks highlighted the escalated stakes. This was no longer simply about marital assets, but about legal accountability for potentially criminal actions. The weight of Nathan's miscalculation became increasingly apparent with each procedural statement. When my testimony was called, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Nathan. The man seated at the respondent's table appeared physically identical to the husband I had known. The same precisely trimmed hair, the same tailored shirt, and subtle cologne I could detect as I passed. Yet he seemed fundamentally altered by the context of exposure. His customary confidence had been replaced by a tightly controlled tension evident in his jaw and the stiffness of his posture. Taking the witness stand, I was struck by the strange intimacy of the moment, speaking publicly about profound betrayal while the perpetrator sat mere feet away. After being sworn in, I focused on Rebecca as she began her questioning, her familiar presence anchoring me in the unfamiliar setting. Mrs. Donovan, can you describe the circumstances surrounding your discovery of the property transfer at issue in these proceedings? Rebecca asked, establishing the foundation of our case with deliberate precision. Drawing a steady breath, I recounted the sequence of events, my labor and delivery, Nathan's mysterious absence and phone call, the security camera alert that had revealed his actions while I was bringing our daughter into the world. The clinical detachment of legal testimony provided a framework that allowed me to relay these painful details without becoming overwhelmed by their emotional content. When Rebecca introduced the security footage as evidence, the courtroom fell into stunned silence as the video played on monitors. The images were unambiguous. Nathan at our dining room table with the notary, forging my signature, making false claims about power of attorney, completing the fraudulent transfer with methodical precision. And where were you when these events took place? Rebecca asked after the footage concluded. In the delivery room at Metropolitan Hospital, I replied, my voice steady despite the renewed surge of indignation the images provoked. I had given birth to our daughter Charlotte approximately 4 hours earlier. Judge Hernandez's expression reflected the same disturbed reaction evident throughout the courtroom. The timing of Nathan's actions, exploiting my most vulnerable moment to execute financial fraud, carried a callousness that transcended ordinary marital disputes. The questioning proceeded through the evidence we had assembled, financial records documenting systematic asset diversion, the parallel residence established in Lake Forest, the relationship with Vanessa Mercer, and most recently, Diane Winters. Testimony regarding professional misconduct and potential forgery affecting multiple clients. Throughout my testimony, I maintained direct eye contact with whoever was speaking, Rebecca, the judge, and eventually Nathan's attorney during cross-examination. I deliberately avoided looking at Nathan himself, not from fear, but from a clear-eyed recognition that his reaction was irrelevant to the truth I was presenting. Nathan's attorney, Martin Goldstein, approached cross-examination with evident caution, his strategy clearly constrained by the overwhelming evidence already introduced. Mrs. Donovan, isn't it possible there was a miscommunication about the property transfer? He suggested, attempting to establish reasonable doubt. Perhaps discussions you don't recall or didn't fully understand at the time? No, I replied simply. There were no discussions about transferring our home solely to Nathan's name. Furthermore, the security footage clearly shows him claiming I had authorized him to sign on my behalf, which I never did. Goldstein attempted several more angles, suggesting administrative error, questioning my understanding of our financial arrangements, implying that pregnancy might have affected my memory of prior conversations. Each attempt fell flat against the concrete evidence and my composed factual responses. When Nathan finally took the stand, the transformation in his demeanor was striking. Gone was the confident financial advisor who had built his career on projected certainty. In his place sat someone visibly calculating each response, eyes darting, between his attorney, the judge, and occasionally toward me. "Mr. Donovan, did you forge your wife's signature on the property transfer documents?" Judge Hernandez asked directly, cutting through the evasive responses Nathan had been offering to his attorney's carefully constructed questions. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Nathan's shoulders tensed visibly as he considered his options. With video evidence already admitted, outright denial would constitute perjury, a criminal offense beyond the civil matters currently at issue. "I signed on her behalf," he finally acknowledged, attempting to frame the action in more favorable terms. "We had previously discussed transferring assets for tax purposes. The timing was unfortunate, but motivated by filing deadlines." Did Mrs. Donovan explicitly authorize you to sign her name on these specific documents?" the judge pressed, his tone indicating he recognized the evasion. Nathan's hesitation spoke volumes. "Not in those exact words," he admitted reluctantly. "But she had generally trusted me with financial matters throughout our marriage." The distinction between genuine authorization and presumed entitlement crystallized in that moment. Nathan had never sought my consent because he fundamentally believed my consent was irrelevant. In his worldview, my role was to accommodate his decisions rather than participate in them as an equal partner. As questioning continued, Nathan's defense deteriorated from evasion to contradiction to implausible explanations. His attempts to characterize the Lake Forest property as an investment opportunity, the relationship with Vanessa Mercer as a professional connection, and the offshore accounts as legitimate tax planning grew increasingly strained against the comprehensive evidence we had assembled. When questioned about Diane Winter's testimony regarding notarization of documents without proper signature verification, Nathan attempted to shift blame to administrative procedures within the firm. Defense that collapsed when presented with emails in which he had explicitly instructed her to notarize pre-signed documents. By the hearing's conclusion, the judicial atmosphere had shifted from evaluation of specific orders to comprehensive assessment of Nathan's credibility and conduct. Judge Hernandez's closing remarks confirmed this evolution. "The evidence presented today goes well beyond contested marital assets," he noted gravely. "It suggests a pattern of deliberate financial misrepresentation, identity fraud, and potential securities violations that cannot be addressed solely within family court jurisdiction." The judge maintained all existing emergency orders, the house title restoration, asset freeze, and exclusive possession provisions, while adding several new protections based on the expanded evidence. Most significantly, he ordered formal referral of potential criminal matters to the district attorney's office for investigation and possible prosecution. "These proceedings will resume in 30 days, Judge Hernandez concluded. During that time, the respondent is required to provide complete financial disclosure under penalty of perjury, including all domestic and international accounts, properties, and business entities established or controlled during the marriage." As the courtroom began to clear, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Nathan, not with hatred or triumph, but with the clear-eyed recognition of someone seeing truth without illusion. The man who had once been the center of my constructed future now appeared fundamentally diminished, his carefully cultivated persona dissolving under the weight of exposed reality. Rebecca guided me toward the private exit, her hand supportively at my elbow. "That went even better than anticipated," she noted quietly. The judge's referral to the DA accelerates accountability beyond what civil proceedings alone could accomplish. In the corridor, Martin Goldstein approached with a colleague, requesting a moment to discuss potential resolution options. The rapid pivot from contested hearing to settlement overtures confirmed what Rebecca had predicted. Nathan's legal position had become untenable in the face of comprehensive evidence. "We'll review any written proposals through proper channels." Rebecca responded professionally. "All communication should continue through counsel." As we continued toward the exit, I heard my name called from behind, not by attorneys, but by Nathan himself, his voice carrying a note of desperation I had never heard before. "Elise, please, 5 minutes, just hear me out." Turning slowly, I faced the man who had attempted to steal my home while I gave birth to our daughter. The man who had established a parallel life with another woman while presenting himself as a devoted husband. The man whose facade of trustworthiness had finally, irrevocably shattered. "Everything I need to say to you has been said through evidence and testimony," I replied, my voice calm, but carrying throughout the now silent corridor. "The courts will determine appropriate consequences. Charlotte and I will determine our future. Neither requires your input any longer." The simplicity of this statement, neither hostile nor emotional but firmly resolute, seemed to affect Nathan more profoundly than any angry outburst could have. He stood frozen, his carefully constructed responses rendered irrelevant by my refusal to engage on his terms. Turning away without waiting for his reaction, I continued toward the exit where Julia waited with Charlotte. The symmetry was perfect, walking away from artificial constraints toward authentic connection, leaving behind calculated deception to embrace my daughter's uncomplicated truth. Outside, the spring afternoon greeted us with unexpected warmth. The courthouse steps bathed in sunlight that felt symbolically appropriate. As Julia handed Charlotte to me, my daughter's weight in my arms provided perfect counterbalance to the morning's proceedings. A reminder that while legal justice was important, my most essential priority transcended courtrooms and formal judgments. "How do you feel?" Julia asked as we walked toward her car. I considered the question carefully, parsing through the complex emotions of the day. What emerged wasn't the vindication or triumph an outside observer might have expected, but something more fundamental. "Free," I replied simply. "Not because the legal battle is over, it's just beginning, but because I've faced the full truth and remained standing. Whatever happens next, that knowledge can't be taken from me." Cradling Charlotte against my shoulder, I turned to look back at the courthouse where Nathan likely remained with his attorneys, planning desperate strategies to mitigate consequences that could no longer be avoided. The contrast between our positions wasn't about victory or defeat, but about fundamentally different relationships with truth. I had faced devastating reality and found strength in its clarity. Nathan remained entangled in collapsing deceptions he had constructed around himself. In that essential difference lay not just the resolution of our specific conflict, but the foundation of radically different futures, one built on honest recognition of reality, the other on increasingly desperate attempts to maintain illusion. "Let's go home," I said to Julia, emphasizing the word that now carried renewed meaning. Not just a physical structure Nathan had attempted to steal, but a concept reclaimed through courageous confrontation with truth. Charlotte stirred against my shoulder, her tiny hand grasping my collar with newborn instinct. In that simple, perfect gesture lay confirmation of what truly mattered, not the courtroom victory or legal vindication, but the authentic connection that would form the foundation of our future together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.